It's an absolute pleasure to be here speaking to you. I've got quite a bit to get through, and in 15 minutes you can't discuss the whole world, which is what I was trying to do. So I better get into it. No diversions. So what is regenerative agriculture? This is a bit of a working definition that a few people and I have kicked around. It's not the final one, but it's about allowing measurable improvements over time in ecosystem function and biological diversity, driven mostly by the self-organising ecosystem towards social, economic and ecological goals. Now, I think that the important thing about that is that I've got to the point of feeling that our management of agriculture in this country and worldwide the effect or the consequences of our management has to be to increase diversity and not degrade land. If we're not doing that, we're in trouble. I find it actually quite bemusing that that the conventional version of agriculture demands from people like me to prove that what we're doing with regenerative agriculture is actually a reality, when the conventional model of agriculture has presided over the loss of about 70% of the organic carbon in soils worldwide. So that's how poorly I was managing in 1982. And that was a major shock to me because I loved that farm. And I made a pact with myself then that I would never see those scenes again, because I had to admit to myself that I was the agent in that scene. It didn't just happen because of dry weather. So that's what that paddock looks like a couple of weeks ago. In a very dry, we've had 18 months of dry weather. We've learned a lot, and we've learned a lot because we've watched the landscape teaching us. So the natural tendency of evolution is to elaborate and diversify the biota. Human societies, as James has mentioned, have developed by the conversion of natural capital into other forms of capital. And absolutely everything we do is underpinned by photosynthesis. Now, human beings now are using the product of more than 50% of all the photosynthesis that happens on Earth. And that is why we're in the big sixth extinction event at the moment, because we've taken so much energy out of ecosystems that other things are dropping out. So this is how the natural world proceeds. It's incredibly diverse, complex, recycling, renewing itself all the time. Agriculture has been unbelievably beneficial to human beings, but it creates simplified communities. That's the opposite of the trend of evolution. Evolution's been going on since life began 3.7 billion years ago. So it is a worry that the way we produce food produces landscapes that are the opposite to the trend of evolution. So we now have, we're grazing cattle at the moment, and they recycle the product that we grow in the landscape. We allow that to grow for long periods of time between grazings, usually about five months, depending on growth, speed of growth. But those animals are like all the temperate grasslands of the world evolved in the presence of grazing animals. So don't be sucked in by the idea that we don't need animals. If we didn't have animals recycling carbon in the landscape in this country, we'd be incinerated. Now, one of the great things that we've learnt with some training that we did, I did a master's degree in sustainable agriculture, and then I also did some holistic management training, and in that you learn about ecology. Ecology is always trying to become more elaborate and diverse, depending on the sort of disturbances we give it. Now, this is in 2016, it was a wet spring, and these are native grasses, wallaby grasses. There was 1 hectare of native grass on our property in 1999. Now we've got rafts of it all over the property and it's romping across the landscape. So you can manage to allow that to take place. And these are summer active perennial grasses. They've been absent from our district for 100 years. We've introduced a bit of seed, just dribbling it out of our hand as we're poking around on motorbikes. Have sown a little bit, but it's being spread by cattle now, and it's you know, nobody wants rain in summer where I live, but and we didn't either probably 30 years ago, but now when it rains in summer, we get this amazing amount of feed. So this is another example of community dynamics, the capacity of the landscape to be more complex. This is what we thought was our worst country. It was a saline drainage line, had 20% of the ground was always scald and bare, with salt showing at the surface. It's now, that's an old figure, that 49, it's up to 58 species, 15 of them are native perennials. So that's happened at no cost. It's just a bit of understanding and managing grazing. Now, our tree cover was 3% in 1971 when I came to Boorowa, and we've increased that to 20% now. And as that's gone up, the species of birds that exist on our place has gone up with it. And that the number of birds that have been identified on our property now is up to 128 species. So I've just said that. Yeah, during 9 years of dry rainfall, dry weather in 2002 to 2010, we didn't spend any money feeding stock. We changed the numbers of stock so that we didn't lose ground cover. We've done the same now. We reduced our stocking rate by 40% in November 2017 because we had a weak spring. So we assessed how much grass we had. We never knew how to do that before. We used to blunder into droughts and then start spending a heap of money and turning the place into a desert. Now we know how to assess how much grass we've got at any moment, and we always adjust our livestock to match the grass. Yeah, we've all talked about the grasses. We haven't put any purchased inputs into this farm for 20 years. Now, in conventional agricultural terms, we shouldn't be able to be growing grass. We're growing more grass now than we've ever grown, and it's because we've always, in conventional terms, looked at soil as physical and chemical properties, but we haven't heard a thing today about biology, and the management of our grasses is feeding the soil biology because of the sugars exuded by the roots of the plants as they get big. So there's a wonderful quote from a guy called Aldo Leopold. If you haven't read The Land Ethic, I suggest you get a copy of it. It's on the net. Written in 1948, and he had this beautiful expression for explaining what an ecosystem is. And he said it's like a slowly augmenting, revolving fund of life. And I think it's a pretty good description. And the other big one is that in moving towards this, making decisions towards the environment all the time, we're making social, economic and environmental decisions all together, and we're going towards goals that we've set for those three parameters, and all the decisions we make have to lead us toward the things we want. Now, having done that, in the conventional times before when we're throwing money around the landscape, growing crops and trying to make a quid and not making a quid most of the time, we were just incrementally going backwards economically. Our debt was growing all the time. Every time we'd go into a drought, we'd go every time we get into a drought, we'd go $100,000 in reverse. So now we've changed that. We're not thinking about the money much anymore. We're looking at the environment, and we're almost debt-free. So this is earnings before. This is part of this program that James was talking about, the National Environmental Science Project, Emerging Priorities. This is our farm from 2004 to 2016, earnings before interest and tax, and it's gradually looking good. Now, if you look at the blue lines, the blue bars there are the regenerative farmers in the NESP project that I just mentioned, and the orange and grey bars are that's a big benchmarking project done by Holmes and Sackett on Farm, Ag Insights it's called. It's a huge benchmarking thing, and we've compared this is 10-year average supplementary feed costs. And we've never fed any stocks for 20 years. And most farmers that call themselves regenerative have very low or no feeding costs. Now this is the sort of scene that we keep seeing. You know, this has been going on every time it gets dry. This is only last year, and it's not far from where I live. And farmers hate having this scene. They desperately don't want their farms to get bare, but they keep doing what I was doing back in '82, blundering into these dry times and getting depressed about the way their landscape looks. Now these are some social indicators that were part of the NESP program, and the first one is, I don't know whether can you read those words? You can? So it's basically the health and well-being of people who are identified as regenerative farmers. They're the left-hand bars. They're extremely positive, and it's very rare to get shifts of more than about 2 points on these. They're worldwide surveys. They're very robust, so it's incredibly significant that they're so much higher. Social well-being in conventional farmers is a major unsung story of depression in the landscape when it gets dry. And the opposite's happening to farmers who call themselves regenerative. Their health and well-being is going up. And this is about worthwhileness, feeling worthwhile about what we're doing. So, yeah, this is 2005. It was a dry year, but we got a couple of falls of rain in the spring, and because we rest our paddocks for a long time, we get massive amounts of feed. The ground's covered all the time. Plants get big, a lot of organic matter in our soils, big water holding capacity, good structure, lots of soil life, which is many of the things we do in conventional agriculture are antagonistic to soil life, and that is a major problem for the conventional model of agriculture. So in conclusion, I've got a lot of conclusions. Yeah, manage for ecology, people and profit. Allow the landscape to become more elaborate and diverse. You can do that at almost no cost. Manage for all life, not just yourselves, because we depend on every other living thing. Yeah, get away. This is a big shift I think I made in my mind and heart, was to get away from this way of just having an economic relationship with the landscape. Matching livestock to the carrying capacity of the farm, which is a dynamic relationship. It's changing all the time, and if you're not acting on that and getting it pretty nearly right, it'll be costing you dearly socially, economically and environmentally. Yeah, allowing these processes to happen costs nothing, almost nothing, except a bit of understanding. That takes a bit of effort. Well, this is my little philosophical contentment will descend on you and your business and the ecosystems whose natural tendency to elaborate and diversify you have allowed. Allowing something to happen that's been the way of doing business in the natural world for 3.7 years is an incredibly empowering thing for a human being and very calming on the psyche. Yeah, if you want to read the full 90 pages of NESPEP, you can get it at vbs.net.au. That's Mark Gardner's business up in Dubbo. The people who were involved in that program, James mentioned quite a few of them, University of Canberra, ANU Fenner School, University of Queensland did some of the economics, CSIRO and New South Wales OEH. and it was led by Sue Ogilvie and Vanguard Business Services, and ABARES provided quite a bit of input as well. Thank you very much.